Hello and welcome back, and today we are looking at setting up a QNAP NAS without connecting it to the internet. This is part one of our three-part series where we're going to be utilizing this, the QNAP TS653D, and we're going to be setting this device up from scratch. And across these videos we're going to set it up for the first time with nice secure offline settings. We're then going to move on to part two where we're going to be sorting out some of the in-NAS applications without the internet, and number three, in part three, we're going to be looking at setting the device up with a Windows machine for backups, for synchronization, and ultimately so you can access your data. But because we're setting this up from scratch, we've got the whole thing on the table. I've got the mic a lot closer than normal because we're going to be doing all kinds of stuff here, mainly on the screen. But what I wanted to do more than anything is to talk you guys through a few of the different ways to utilize this device without connecting it to the internet. So why would you use a NAS without connecting it to the internet? Well, let's be honest, recently there has been a lot going on with QNAP and of course QLocker. A number of people, when they've bought a NAS for the first time, are slightly wary about connecting a NAS to the internet. A lot of you, when you buy a NAS, you bought it specifically so you wouldn't have to connect to the internet. You wanted your data to be in-house, and therefore the idea of connecting one of these to the big, wide, angry internet and moving away from things like Google Drive, Dropbox and more means that you don't want this device at any point to be connected to the internet. So that is what we're doing. However, while we're doing this, it's worth highlighting that throughout stages of this, we are using a computer that is connected to the internet. Unfortunately, a lot of the resources we're going to need to do this are internet based, and we can't just ignore that. We can't pull application from thin air. These devices do arrive with firmware inside, and technically you do not need to, when setting this up, to use the internet at all because there's firmware on it. But the firmware inside, as time moves on, will not be as up to date as the most recent firmware, which may have system advantages, system upgrades and more. So it's always advisable that the first firmware that you put on one of these is the most recent firmware, and then periodically you can check for yourself when new firmware arrives. But of course, the first thing we're going to want to do is slam some drives inside this bad boy. I'm just going to double check right now. Our laptop is recording. So all NASs are different. There's lots of them on the table here. I'm running a lot of extensive multi-tier backup for another video that still hasn't finished. It's been interrupted by a lot of stuff. But as you can see, all NASs are different, and QNAP has a quite wide range of different devices. In the case of this, what we would do is remove the front panel. You make sure the device is not powered on at all. It doesn't matter if you've got the power connected too much during this stage, but just make sure that it is powered off. Remove a tray in the majority of most QNAP NASs. These trays have got screw holes there to screw the drives in, or they're click and load. We can just attach a drive inside. Lucky for you, I've already put two drives inside this 6-bay NAS. It's worth remembering you don't have to fully populate a NAS on day one. You can get away with as little as one drive, but I do recommend at least two, and to take advantage of RAID, something we'll talk about later on. But if I put that tray back in there, I can show you that I've already installed two SSDs inside this device. Now, why am I using SSDs instead of hard drives? Two reasons really. One, I've used most of my hard drives in this video here in the background, but also because later on when I'm talking to you about direct access with this device, not using the wider network or using the internet, SSDs can promote some great speeds directly. So I've installed that drive back in there. I'm going to pop that little cover back on. And it's worth highlighting how you connect with this device can vary. So maybe you are connecting this device to somewhere else in your home or network, and you might be using a switch. This is a box, not to be confused with a router, which has got multiple ports in it, and all of these devices allow each device connected to this can then communicate and exchange data. It also allows you to completely sever internet connectivity from any one of these devices on the network if it is connected to a router, or just not let the internet go into there and let this be a private switch. And therefore, that network does not have external connectivity. However, if you want to be like directly connecting with this device, and you can use very, very long cable, you can just go ahead, take an Ethernet cable, connect it to the rear of your NAS, and then take the other end and quite literally plug it into the other device. Again, it can be your PC, it can be your Mac, it can be anything. We're using a Windows environment today, but you can just directly connect it point to point. That will still work. Although, remember, if you're using a 1 GBE port on your PC or Mac, that's the maximum speed you're going to get. This is a 2.5 GBE NAS, and of course there are 10 GBE versions out there and 5G and more, but you're always going to be dictated by the thinnest connection in there. And in this case, it's going to be 1G, so 100 to 109 megs. So now I've connected it, I can go ahead and click that button. And now we're going to let this spin up. The other reason I used SSDs, by the way, for this video, even though I did have a couple of WD-REDs available, was simply that because of the close proximity for the majority of this video, I didn't want too much click, hum, whir noise from this system with hard drives. With SSD, it's going to be a lot quieter overall. So we're going to let that spin up. When it's ready, it will beep. And in the meantime, what we're going to do now is we're going to flick over to the screen where I'm going to talk you guys through a lot of the assets that you're going to need to download and have ready for this installation. Once again, beep. This is where we're going to be showing you how to utilize this device without connecting it to the internet, but you are going to need an internet connected system to get the very latest things to install on it before you make sure it's ready to rock, and then you sever the internet if that's the way you want to work. Let's make our way to the screen. So here we are on the desktop of my laptop here. It's worth highlighting once again that we are screen recording here. We're utilizing OBS there. And of course, I've had to sort of play around with the sound settings a little bit, but we are in quite close proximity with my laptop and with a NAS. So there may be a little bit of background hum there throughout this video. We're using, if you look there on the screen, we've got the TS653D page here, and we've got lots of tabs open here that we're going to go through in today's video, along with a few others. The first tool we're going to need to use for your first time setup is QFinder Pro. If you click up here in the download section, it opens up this tab here. And in the download section, it will automatically find the NAS, or you can look for it manually if you choose. And from here, you've got lots of tabs that have got different applications. So the first one you're going to want to make sure you download is QTS. This is the operating system for this NAS. Go ahead and select your region. I've already downloaded it prior to this video for us. And the next thing you need to download is to head into the utilities, and then from here, scroll down and find QFinder Pro. Make sure you're using the right one for you. If you're using Ubuntu, Mac or Windows, make sure you download the correct application there. Or there are a few others that we'll go through in a later video that are good for synchronization and backups. But for now, just make sure you download QFinder Pro for the right system that you're using. Ideally, the most recent version of this application. Now, it is a straightforward exe to install, and again, it just presents itself nice and easily. There it is, QFinder Pro right there. It's nice and straightforward to install, and it doesn't require any external access. And when you've done that, you can go ahead and open the application like I've done there. As you can see, it's already found the NAS on the network. And there's another beep there, letting us know that it's ready for initialization. So, if you don't see a NAS here on screen and you have connected the NAS directly via the Ethernet cable, or you are connected via a switch, go ahead and click the refresh button there. As you can see, it's found the NAS. If you are directly connecting to the NAS point to point like I'm doing in this video, it will appear as the IP 169 generally. Otherwise, this IP in theory should be 192 onwards. So we can go ahead and click yes if we want, or for now, we can look at some of the options here. You can change the configuration if it's a pre-made NAS. You can right click and there's lots of options there. There's lots of bits and bobs that you can do on this. But when you're ready to interact with your NAS, you can either select that pop-up that arrived earlier or just double click and it will open in your browser window. So let's move this tab over here. And the first thing it does is allow you to check the warranty of your device to see if with the serial number what your warranty length is, to register it or get extended warranty if you choose. I'm going to ignore that for now, but that might be something you want to try. Next, you've got the options for installing and setting up the device for the very first time. Go ahead and click Smart Installation. And from here, you need to name your NAS. Now, It is good if you keep it as unique as possible, because if when the time comes you want to connect your NAS to the internet, this will layer into the identity of your device. I'm going to put 653D NAS, but I recommend you go for something a little bit more unique. The username admin can be changed later, but for now you have to go ahead and add a password for your NAS. Now, if you put in a low security password, it will highlight this to you. You can go ahead with something a little bit more intense, and then from there, once you've put your password in, you can go ahead and double check with that if you choose, or just click next. Next, it will ask you to confirm the time zone that you're in. So, of course, for me, I am in Greenwich Mean Time, so I'm going to go ahead and select it there. And then, of course, you can either set it as the same time as the device that you're on, or use internet time services. Again, it's up to you, but given that we're trying to do this with absolutely no intervention with the internet, we can go ahead and use the same time as the device that we're using today. After that, click next. Now, this is an important one with DHCP and IP addresses. Now, for those that aren't aware, DHCP in its most general form means that with all the different devices on your local area network, the identity of your NAS can change. So it can be fluid and things can move around on a busy network. That's quite useful, but if you are going to be using the NAS on your local area network and you have no intention of connecting with the internet, or at least in the short term, go ahead and click static IP. This will fix the identity of the NAS on your network via that port. You can reset it later if you choose, but it will also allow any setting up for backups and synchronization to be static and therefore non-movable on your network environment. I'm going to go ahead and create a static IP address, and that will ensure this device's identity doesn't change because of DHCP. If we go for this, we can go ahead and keep the original IP address, or we can change it to something new. You don't have to, but sometimes it's easier to create a new identity on that IP. Next, mention how many different kinds of file operating system you're going to be dealing with. On a purely Windows environment, you can just leave it as it is, or if you're going to have a mixed environment of different OSs and clients, tick appropriately there. I'm using just Windows, so I'm going to leave it at just Windows. And there you go. It has now been set up, and all the options are available there on screen to let us know that this is the summary that we're going with and how we're setting up the device for the very first time. Then click apply. It will warn us that any data on the disks inside is going to be wiped, and that's absolutely fine. But for now, let's click yes and allow this device to begin its initialization. Now, the amount of time that this takes will depend on the power of the system, the drives inside, and the choices you have made. So what we're going to do while it does this, as I'm using SSDs, it will be quite quick, and all the assets that we're going to be utilizing are directly from my laptop. This should make the process a little bit quicker. The system may well reboot while we're doing this to make sure that all the checks and things that we have done are correct. And while it does that in the background, and you will hear a beep, let's have a look at some of the other stuff that we're going to be doing later. As mentioned, there are loads of applications, and we're going to cover these in a little bit more detail in parts 2 and 3 later on. But it's worth highlighting that in order to make sure this NAS is not connected to the internet, be it in the short term or the long term, that here is where you're going to be getting all of your apps, be it from the application center here, or by clicking the App Center or mobile app area, able to see a lot of the applications that you're going to need to install on your NAS. Now, I will be reiterating a lot of these points later. However, it's worth mentioning that for me, a number of the applications for a great offline NAS are as follows. And of course, we are talking about QNAP, with other NAS brands having their own individual setups. First up, QBoost is a very small application, and not everyone needs it, but in a pinch it can be useful. At one click, it's able to kill unused applications and basically free up memory on your device. It's a small application, but can be quite useful for knowing when your QNAP NAS is utilizing or accessing or still running lots of applications that you may not need, and you can terminate them a lot quicker using this tool. Hybrid Backup Sync 3 allows you to create a multi-tiered, multi-site backup strategy from NAS to cloud, NAS to USB, NAS to NAS, or anything really. Just bear in mind that if you're keeping your NAS off the internet, then NAS to cloud is not going to be possible, but you can still synchronize with other NASes via the network or utilizing USB connected devices. Security Counselor will periodically check all of the settings and background options of your QNAP NAS and let you know changes you can make or potential vulnerabilities along the way. Malware Remover, which can be run automatically on a schedule or manually, will check your system for malware. Multimedia Console allows you to completely control the indexing, creation and folder structure of your NAS with regards to multimedia, ensuring that your photos, music and video are accessible, as well as making sure that areas of the NAS that you do not want multimedia accessible can be set up correctly. QSync Central allows you to synchronize with multiple devices via the network or the internet if you choose down the line, such as mobile phones, desktop clients and more. And of course, there is an application for Mac, Windows, Linux and mobile devices to synchronize folders on the fly with your QNAP NAS, something we'll be covering in a lot more detail in part 3. Container Station, although you may not use it, is an application that a lot of QNAP apps need to have pre-installed. This allows certain apps to be run a great deal more smoothly within the closed NAS environment. And although you may not be using containers directly, I do recommend that you install Container Station, as it can be very beneficial to a number of key QNAP NAS applications in the background. QVR Pro is their premium surveillance application that allows you to create an MVR setup with multiple IP cameras all across your home or business environment. Remember, you do not need the internet to use QVR Pro, although if you do want to use tailored alerts to mobile phone devices, email and more, you will need to connect your NAS to the internet. Hybrid Desk Station applies to those of you that take advantage of HDMI equipped NASes, and this is what you use if you want to use HDMI out, a keyboard video mouse setup, things like Plex Media Server, multimedia, surveillance, standalone PCs and more. Finally, if you are going to take advantage of photography on the NAS and you want to take advantage of AI supported recognition while still not connecting to the internet, you want to go ahead and install both QMaggie and the QMaggie Core application. All of the applications we've talked about can be downloaded directly, such as if we click here, it will open up a tab and you can download them directly into your PC. I've already done that in advance for you. There are a bunch of other applications that you may want to be interested in. There are absolutely loads, and if you want to install them on your QNAP NAS without connecting the NAS to the internet, you can download them all here. There's first and third party apps, there's loads to choose from, and again, plenty of information, whether you're going to be using them for business or pleasure. As we can see, the QNAP hasn't quite finished its original setup of all of the stuff that we've done. So what we're going to do is just fast forward now to the completion of the initialization of our QNAP NAS, whereupon we can go ahead and start setting the device up in a far more unique way, create our areas of storage from storage pools to volumes, and install some of those applications as well as the latest firmware that we've already downloaded. Let's fast forward. Right, so here we are on the desktop of our QNAP NAS. So let's go ahead and log in with the details that we created earlier. Remember that we are connecting to this NAS via the network, and the NAS itself does not actually have its own internet connection. As you can see there, I'm connected via Ethernet connection, and I still have the internet on my laptop, but we're not using the internet on the NAS. So for now, let's go ahead and log in. Hopefully I typed that password. I typed it without even thinking about what I was typing there. So we're logging into the device now, and it will present us with the user interface of QTS. Now, the first time you log into a QNAP NAS, this has been commented on before, there is a lot in your face early doors. It's one of the things about QNAP NAS that we have touched on before. It is certainly a bit of a steeper learning curve than some other brands. A lot of these you can get rid of first time, but the first time you set up the device, most of these are kind of trying to help you. It's just I wish they didn't throw it all at you immediately. So the first thing we're going to look at there is it's saying about there being a DNS problem. This is because we aren't connected to the internet service provider. So don't worry too much about this one. Remember, we are using the NAS without internet connectivity. The next one is to do with the license center, because some of the services of the QNAP NAS, particularly business users, will use these licenses. But to be perfectly honest, very few home or even prosumer users are ever going to use these. We can go ahead and say that we never want to see this message again, but of course, you can still get to these via the App Center on the NAS. Next is to do with storage and snapshots. This one's a little bit more useful. This is the one that effectively helps the end user set the device up for the first time correctly with everything from snapshots to overall storage. And if you are going to be utilizing a lot of these services, this is a good way to start. You can flick through these steps and they detail a lot of difference between the different stuff in there. Sorry, clearing my throat. But again, I will be guiding you through most of these, so we can go ahead and flick through all of them. So again, we can go ahead and click new storage pool there, but I'd rather show you guys how to do it cleanly without these pop-ups. So for now, I'm going to click finish. Next, the data collection agreement. This is the one where QNAP is saying that they will request if you'd like to submit anonymous data to QNAP so they can see how the system is used, so it can be improved later. Of course, you can click no, and if you are going to utilize this device without the internet, it won't make a blind bit of difference, but just in case you never want to have to submit that data, just go ahead and click no. And again, there's the storage and snapshots, something we're going to come back to in a moment. And here is the help center that guides you through the device for the first time. Again, you can use this help guide and it will be available at all times. So if you don't ever want to see it again, click that tick and click OK, and then you can get rid of it. So here we are on the desktop via the web browser of our QNAP NAS. Once again, we aren't connected to the internet. And the first thing we're going to want to do before we do anything else is update this device to the latest firmware. Now, normally the first thing I'd say is to do your storage, but just make sure before you do anything else that you're using the latest firmware. So click Control Panel and scroll down and you'll find the option in here with regards to, where is it, the firmware update option. Click Firmware Update and it will say that the version of the firmware it's using, and if you try to select Auto Update or Check for Update, because I don't have the internet connected, unfortunately it can't find it. So this is why earlier on we had to download that firmware here, because what we need to do now is go to Firmware Update. From there, click Browse. Find it, in my case, in the download section of our NAS. Find it, there's our firmware update, the latest one I downloaded earlier, and then simply click Update System. Now when we do this, do bear in mind the NAS will have to reboot once again, but do take note we're using firmware 4.5.1 and the latest firmware according to this in the App Center is firmware 4.5.2, so do bear that in mind. So for now, let's click Update System, and from there we're going to fast forward to the NAS rebooting after the installation of the latest firmware update. As you can see, it will update the system. We don't have to let it update, but I strongly recommend that you let the latest firmware take hold, reboot the system, and proceed with the creation of our storage areas. Let's let it install that update now. Okay, so our NAS has rebooted. Let's log back into the device and we can go ahead and click login. So now we're going back in and we should see that the firmware has indeed changed. But let's have a look. As you can see in this latest firmware update, unsurprisingly with everything that's gone on with QLocker, there have been a few little changes there. And even though we are still offline, it is worth highlighting that the auto update function there is already kind of pushed the idea that do we want to enable auto updates if we choose. Now, we can say yes there, but of course, because we're not connected to the internet, that means that occasionally the system is just going to keep telling us, you're not connected to the internet, we can't do auto updates, because how will the system know if there's an update if it's not connected to the internet? However, I'm going to go ahead and click yes on that for now. But even though we don't have internet connectivity, do not be surprised if that means that the NAS complains a little that we're not connected to the internet while it searches. So if we go back into the control panel, we can see there that the firmware has indeed changed to the new 4.5.2 firmware there. We've updated to the latest firmware, and the next thing we want to do is have a look at storage. So we can go to it here, or if you choose, you can go straight up there and go ahead into the storage and snapshot area there. And this is where we're going to be creating our RAID and our areas of storage on the device. Now, as you can see, there's a little breakdown there, a little graphical breakdown of how these things work, namely that you've got all of your drives inside. These form your RAID, your storage pool as well. You can create multiple if you choose. And on top of these are your little containers of storage, be they LUNs, which take advantage of iSCSI targets, and there's other options too. We could go into more detail, but a lot of that is much bigger than this video, and I think I'm going to use already enough of your time on this. So let's go ahead and click next, and there's lots of stuff that I'm going to talk you through now. But for now, there we go. It's saying right now that we can create backups and all the snapshots going onto other devices on the local area network if we choose. And of course, we can go through those later on. But for now, I'm going to click finish rather than click start new pool, because I just want to show you guys what this is. This is our area of storage. As you can see, there's the two SSDs mentioned earlier. So the first thing we want to do is create our area, the storage pool. So you can click it there or go into storage and snapshots and you can click create new pool there. There's lots of different ways to do it, but for now, let's create our new storage pool. So the first thing it's doing is asking us, do we want to create a traditional RAID or take advantage of Q-tier? For those that aren't aware, Q-tier is when you use multiple kinds of storage. When it's NVMe or SATA SSD or hard drive, it creates a storage pool that is technically merged of all of these different storage types, and therefore the system learns what the more frequently accessed files, particularly if you're editing, this is very useful, and moves more frequently accessed files onto the super fast tiers. Now, we're not going to use that in this video, but I thought I'd highlight that in case you're going to use the NAS for video editing or even photo editing. But for now, I'm going to untick that and then click next. From here, it will ask me to select the drives that I'm going to use. Now, in my case, I am using just the two SATA SSDs here, but of course, if you have more hard drives inside, more will be available. Select the disks you want to use, and then from there, RAID options will appear. Now, the RAID options will differ depending on the number of drives inside. In my case, because it's two drives, I can either use JBOD, known as just a bunch of drives, which just shows a couple of loose disks. RAID 0 is when the two drives are combined together, but that means that there isn't a safety net in the form of redundancy. That is, if one disk breaks, the data will still be lost across all the disks. And RAID 1 finally is when both disks are being read and written to simultaneously at all times. And that means if one disk breaks, you have one disk of safety net. I can't stress this enough. RAID is not a backup. It is a safety net. It is insurance at best. It is not bulletproof and it should never be considered a backup. But for now, I'm going to select the RAID 1 environment to create a RAID 1 across these two disks. If you have extra disks, you can select them here to be used as hot spares. A hot spare is in the event in a RAID that one of your disks dies, the hot spare immediately slots into place and the system will recover the data using the redundancy and then build it onto the hot spare. This is if you are away from your NAS a lot and you want the system to recover from drive failure with a drive that's available at all times. Then we click next. Now, if you are taking advantage of SSDs, such as I am, you can take advantage of SSD over provisioning. In short, SSD over provisioning takes advantage of a small area of space on the SSD, which, although it minimizes the total available capacity, will also allow faster operations on the SSD as it takes advantage of that now used portion of capacity for further throughput. I'm going to disable it, but you may want to take advantage of it in your own settings. Next, you can have an alert threshold so the system will let you know if the overall available storage capacity on the storage pool is being taken advantage of. Normally, I'd say leave that on, but because I'm using two relatively small SSDs, it might be better that I disable it just for my video. But in your case, I'd recommend keeping it. From here, it's going to ask you to confirm the new storage pool you're creating, the allocated space, the amount of space that's going to be available, and how much is system reserved. For now, click Create, and then it will let you know that the disks will be formatted. Click OK and proceed. The amount of time this will take does depend heavily on the number of drives you're utilising as well as the RAID configuration that you're using. A traditional RAID 0 can be exceptionally quick, whereas a RAID 1 can take a little longer depending on the power of the NAS. RAID 5 and RAID 6 easily take the longest, can sometimes take 12 to 24 hours to complete a full synchronization. Now, synchronization is the key word here. Synchronization of the storage pool is when the system goes through the drives and creates the structure of the RAID. It may say that the RAID is ready for the next stage in our test, known as volume creation, but synchronization is the thing in the background that needs to be completed for the real performance of your storage pool. Let's fast forward to the creation of the storage pool. As you can see, the storage pool is now completed. We can go ahead and create our volume. Now, the volume is the container of storage that lives on top of the storage pool. You can have multiple volumes, maybe one for home media, one for business, one for backups, one for surveillance. A lot of users create one large volume on top of the storage pool, taking advantage of the full space. But most business users will create multiple volumes and thereby ensuring that different processes deal with their own container of storage. Which one you go for is purely up to you. But for now, let's click New Volume. Now, this is where there's a difference between each of these different kinds of volume. Of the three, the one I recommend the least is easily static volumes, as this is the one that, although allows great performance and is technically the full size of the available storage in the RAID, it's not great for things like snapshots, and it doesn't offer a lot of support of things like LUNs with those iSCSI targets. Thick volumes, on the other hand, give you a good balance of all the features and functionality of a storage pool. They allow snapshots, and you can expand the storage using expansion devices. It definitely is, as it mentions on there, are created from pre-allocated storage pools where you say how much is inside. However, although you can add storage later on, it still makes it far more preferable to thin volumes, which although seem very, very similar, you still can't use LUNs on this area. It's still a large area of space. So it is recommended that you stick with thick volumes, as it does allow for a single contained volume to be stacked with more of them, as opposed to one that kind of sprawls out of control without you knowing just how much space is readily available. From here, go ahead and click the storage pool. If you have multiple storage pools, they will be listed here, or you can create a new one on the fly if you don't already have one. Here's the one I created just now. I'm going with a thick volume and I click Next. So from here, it's asking us to give the volume a name. By default, it will be Data Vol 1, but you can of course name it whatever you choose. As you can see, it's allowing me to scale just how much volume capacity is going to be on this. Obviously, the maximum is 366. Had we set that alert earlier, it would have ended up, when clicking this, that it would have filled up there and the alarm would have let me know that I've used up lots of space. In my case, because I want to take advantage of things like snapshots and take advantage of some other stuff in the background, you will need to reserve some space. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and leave this at around 250 gigabytes. From here, it's going to ask us to select our file and volume sizes. There's other options too, but these are generally, unless you know what you're doing, better to leave as they are, particularly if you don't know whether you're going to be expanding at a later date. If you are unsure about whether you're going to expand, do take the time to research volume sizes and certainly data block sizing. For now, there's another alert threshold. Once again, this time is based on the capacity of the overall storage being used, and because we're going to be installing a lot of apps, I'm going to disable that alert, but I recommend you keep that on. Next, if you want to take advantage of encryption that allows the data to only be accessible with that encryption key, you can go ahead and enable encryption here. Again, I'm not going to enable it for this video, but it's most certainly an option for those of you that want an extra layer of container security on their data moving forward. Although I will add that once it generates that key and you download it, if you lose that key, both in the text-based form or the digital key, your data is largely lost forever. So use encryption for safety's sake, but make sure you don't lose that key. And lastly, you can have a look at a shared folder. Now, shared folders are an area of storage on the NAS that can be seen via the network or a connected network device. Now, you can create one here. We're going to create one shared folder here, and then I'll show you how to create one manually. But for now, let's call this one 653D Share 1. Click Next, and it will ask you to verify the options you've given for creating your volume. Then click Finish. It's going to go ahead and start creating our volume in the background, as well as creating that shared folder that we just created. For now, let's click Close. It's doing the formatting, and in the background, it is going ahead with our volume. Now, while it does that, let's go into the disk area. This showed the two SSDs that we've got inside this device, and if we flick into the RAID group, we're able to see that that RAID is indeed ready. We can see lots of information about our disks, and once again, we're still not connected to the internet, a very important point. Right, so now the volume has completely finished creation, we can go ahead and make our way into the file management application of our QNAP NAS. We can access it here on the top menu if we choose, or we can go ahead into File Station here and it will display the shared folders. Now, one of the first things you might notice is this down here, the new volume. This is a connected USB drive that I've added to the QNAP NAS. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail in the other videos, I just wanted to highlight it here. But for now, there is our shared folder that we created earlier, the 653D Share 1. This is the shared folder on the NAS, and this is one where some of our data will be living. Now, in our next part, we will be talking more about the installation of applications, but for now, I'm going to show you a couple of little ways to interact with this folder here on the NAS. The first thing you should really think about doing is creating snapshots on here. If you click the Snapshots tab and go for it there, we can go ahead and start creating snapshots. Those are version-based images of the data inside this folder over time. And what this does is allow you, in the event of a problem on your NAS, to be able to reverse changes that have gone, and often is the case, can be utilized to recover from some ransomware and malware. So we go ahead and click Exit, and from here we can see the volume has little in it. Let's go ahead and schedule some snapshots here. We'll enable a schedule and do a daily snapshot at exactly 1 AM when everyone's asleep. We can see the amount of data in there, we can see what it's going to need, we can enable smart snapshots if we choose, and it will only action a snapshot if data has been read or written to since the last snapshot if we use smart snapshots there. Again, we can change the retention policy. How many snapshots do we want to keep? With one snapshot a day, for example, we can have it so it recycles every 7 days. The same goes with guaranteed space if we want to make sure that data remains on the pool at all times for snapshots. But for now, let's go ahead and confirm this snapshot routine. And now it's created that schedule. At 1 AM every day, the content of that volume that we've created are now going to be snapshotted over time. Remember, we can still use this to revert to those previous images, and there's even a tool to carry a lot of those snapshotted images over to a connected USB or external device using Snapshot Replica. And this allows you to carry that over quite easily. So for snapshot replication, we can go ahead and do that, but we will have to enable SSH in the background. But that will allow you to keep a number of these snapshots off system where they can be used, as you can see here, and therefore be reverted to later on in the event of a storage problem. I have made a whole video just on snapshots, and I recommend you check that out. But for now, let's make our way back into this area. As you can see, the snapshots area there. we can go through and it will show us a lot of those snapshotted images if we choose, with the snapshots being listed in that separate folder. So here we are in that shared folder here of the one that we created. Let's say we want to create a separate one. So we wanted to create a new shared folder. So this can be a new shared folder. We're going to call this one 653D2. Again, we can say how much space where we want it to live. We're going to have it living there. We can again set the path to be automatic into the tree of folders or create a new one. We can create access privileges for different users. I'm going to use the admin one for now. I'll end this video by showing you how to create another user, don't worry. But for now, scroll down. If you want it encrypted, click there. If you want it to use any kind of security protocol that's better suited, I should say, to client devices, that can all be done there. You can choose whether you want a recycle bin or not. There's lots of options open to you. Click create and then click OK. And it's now going to create a new shared folder. So now we'll have the 653D and the 653D2 shared folder. Now, if you make your way back to that QNAP app here, rescan the local area environment and find the NAS, what you can do from here is create a mapped network drive. Now, for those that aren't aware, a mapped network drive allows you, on my computer, your standard interface of those directories, to add the NAS here, so you never have to deal with the NAS directly via the user interface just for your data. You can add it here into Windows. This is actually one of two methods that I'm going to show you today. So in order to add the NAS to that structure that I just showed you on Windows, the easy way to do it, although not the one that's supported by most apps, is mapping a network drive. Now that can be done one of two ways. The first way is to right click and select network drives. From there, make sure the IP is correct, then click OK. And then it will list the available network drives, but of course you have to add your security credentials first. Once again, do bear in mind that this NAS is still completely disconnected from the internet. It's the laptop that I'm using that has it. As you can see, there's the 653D and 653D share 2 folder. So say we go into that folder there, and utilizing some of those downloads from earlier, let's drag one of these into there. Let's go with the QBoost application. We've chucked QBoost into that network drive there, and again, this network drive is now completely visible. If we choose, we simply right click, select map network drive, give it a letter, let's call it Q in this case. You can say that you want it to always be connected or connect using different credentials if you choose. Click finish. And there we go. If we go back to my computer, now that share1 file is there completely visible on our Windows system. If we come out and go back into the NAS and we go into D2, there's QBoost. So again, now we can interact with the NAS utilizing our own Windows setup. But as mentioned, although this is by far the easiest way to do it, it's not the most effective, particularly if you're using applications where you wanted to point at the NAS. For users who need that kind of support, I recommend taking advantage of iSCSI targets and LUNs. Now to do this, click iSCSI. From there, you're going to have to enable the services. Again, once again, we're not connected to the internet. The system is still trying to connect to the internet, which it can't because we're not letting it. And then we can go ahead and either launch the Quick Wizard or go through it manually. I recommend going with the Quick Launch Wizard because it can be a little more technical than what we just did. This will allow us to create an area of storage on the NAS which can then be connected to our PC in a far more localized way. Click Next. First, give your target a name. Now bear in mind, the target is the doorway. The LUN is the storage. So let's call this one 653D LUN. It's got a name. We can go into the advanced settings if we choose, or we can go ahead and click Next. If you want to have an additional layer of security on this LUN, use CHAPS. And again, a lot of that will be made a little clearer later on. But for now, if you're not worried too much about that, you can skip this step. After this is done, it will ask us if we want to create that LUN, that area of storage, after the iSCSI target. I recommend leaving that ticked, and you'll see why in a moment. Now we've created the target, the iSCSI target, which is the door. Now we want to create our LUN, our area of storage that we'll see on our local computer. So again, we're going to go ahead and create a brand new one on that same storage pool that has 116 gigabytes free. We're going to go ahead and create a nice straightforward 25 gigabyte area of storage on the NAS. From there, you can change the sector sizing. We can do lots of options as well all along the bottom, but for now, let's call this LUN new LUN. Then we click next. Go ahead and confirm that setting. And now it's going to create that 25 gigabyte container, which we can then begin to connect to our local PC. So on your local PC, now if you are using Mac, things are going to be a little different as are other operating systems, but for PC users, go into the bottom, simply type the word iSCSI, and the one you're looking for is iSCSI Initiator. It should be installed by default with your Windows updates. Now, as you can see, I've connected to a lot of targets. All of these doors are ones I've connected to in the past for other videos. I can delete them, but I do come back to them from time to time, and I do have a whole video, all of this stuff on the table behind me at the beginning that I'm using. But for now, click Discovery, then go into Discovery Portal. From here, enter the IP of the NAS you're using if it's not already listed on screen. You can click Advanced to make sure you can enable chaps if you're utilizing them, if you're using some of the login credentials from earlier, but if you're not, go ahead and click OK. It's now added the IP of this NAS to its target portals where it will look for the NAS. And if we scroll down, we can see there is the door that we've opened and that new 653D LUN that I've just created. For now, click Connect. Click Multipath if multiple users are going to be dealing with this, and again, you can alter or amend the login credentials and chaps that you may have entered earlier. But for now, click OK. You'll know if it's worked because it will say connected. Now on your Windows PC, go into the My PC area. As you see, it's not appeared. Our mapped drive from earlier has, but again, this isn't quite as fluid and easy to use as our local C drive. So what we want to do is go into Manage here at the top. If you can't see Manage, select the Computer tab, not the View tab if you're seeing that, and then select Manage. It will open up a new Administrative Tools window for us to interact with in Computer Management. You can go ahead if you choose and just type Computer Management here at the bottom, and it will still find this window if you choose. From here, select Storage, then Disk Management, and this will show all of the available connected drives. And as you can see, now we've connected to the iSCSI target, we can see that 25 gigabyte area we created. It's now asking us to initialize the disk. Do not select Master Boot Record, as that's generally used for your OS. Click OK. And now the drive is visible. The next thing we need to do is right click, select Simple Volume, then click Next. You can ignore most of these unless you are looking for a very precise iSCSI target. Give it a letter. In this case, I'm going to go for N for NAS. Click Next. Give it a name. So we'll call this one 653D LUN. Again, just the same. It doesn't have to match the other one. You can do a quick format. It doesn't matter too much. You can even change the file system if you choose. And from there, click Next. Once you click Finish, it will quickly format the new volume. And there you go. If we go back in, you can now see that the NAS is now visible as an area of storage, and it's not listed as a network location. It's being viewed as a proper device and drive like all the others. An exceptionally useful thing to do, and allows you to interact with the NAS once again in a far more local and accessible fashion. Again, let's dump a file in there for the hell of it, or chuck QBoost in there. And then from there, we've can now interact with it on our local NAS. There's the iSCSI target all there on screen. Everything is easy, and we can even set up a snapshot schedule for that LUN as well. Not just the volume, but create a brand new snapshot routine there in the background for the LUN we've just created. So again, nice schedule on that one. We can take one-off snapshots if we choose. We can even select the schedule as well. But it's worth highlighting when you create snapshots that it will still take up guaranteed snapshot space on the NAS that you needed to create in advance. So we'll come out of it there. Come out of it there. And as you can see, we're still on the user interface using the web browser. But the next thing we want to do is to create a new user for our system. You shouldn't rely on the admin account of your NAS to do all of the work, because you run the risk of, if you get your details leaked, that someone has full user access. To create a brand new user, so your admin information is not the only thing you're using to access the NAS, which can be unsafe, go into the control panel and select users. From users, you can see the admin account you created, whereupon here you can change rights, password credentials and more, but you can also go ahead and create a brand new user. Give that user a name, give them a password, verify that password, and then from there you can also enter phone numbers and emails if you want to take advantage of automated notifications. But again, if your NAS isn't connected to the internet, you're not going to be able to use these. On the right hand side of the screen, you've got user groups. So if you want to create individual groups that have access to certain assets on the NAS, you can create groups and then add users to groups. So for example, in the business sense, that might be sales, marketing, warehouse and more. Or you can go ahead and keep individual users with their own shared folder permissions and applications. So this user here, we can give them access to the shared folders for read and write, but we can deny them access to other folders if we choose, and create a very bespoke area of access for this user if we choose. Same goes for applications that we've installed and services. We can say which ones they can access. And once that's done, if you log back into the NAS with the credentials you're creating here, you will only be able to see these apps and only be able to interact with these folders or see these folders to the level that you give them at this stage. And that's really it. You can create multiple users, and each of those individual users will only have the control you give them. And again, if you want to create batches of group users, you can do that too. If you want to create groups so you can move people into different areas of your home or business, from family to business users that have some people that need more security and access than others, it can all be done there. And that's really it. In our next video, we will be looking at accessing the NAS and installing some of the key applications for the first time. I know this has been a long video, but it's probably the most important one of the three. If you have found this video helpful, do let me know, but do stay tuned for the next video where we will be looking at not only installing those apps, but looking at setting up QSync and setting up some of the back and forth of this NAS in a day-to-day environment. Thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed the video, click like. If you want to learn more, click subscribe. Visit the link in the description to NAS Compares with our free advice section to help you every step of the way. It is genuinely a free advice section, and if you do need help, it's unbiased. It might take an extra day or so for me and my colleague Ed to answer your emails, but we just want to help people on these things, and so do take advantage of it. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.